Hello, and welcome to the 2022 Quarter 1 edition of the Tellico Village POA Board Update. I'm your host, Carla Johnson. Stay tuned as we hear from Board President Marty Inkrott about this year's board goals, growth in the village and what it means for the future, as well as current hot topics. I'm here with POA Board President Marty Inkrott, and we've been discussing the important village topics from the first quarter of this year. Welcome, Marty, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Carla. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Great. Now, we've just completed the first quarter of 2022, and it is truly an exciting time to be in Tellico Village. The board is considering a number of vital issues that will have lasting impact on the future of the village. Now, from my experience on the board, I realize that making big decisions can sometimes seem like a quick and easy process for the members, especially when a topic is on the agenda for the open session, and after what appears to be a brief discussion, the president calls for a motion and a vote, and just like that, a decision is made. However, we know that's not really the case. Will you please explain the process?
So sure, when we have decisions to make in the meetings, we are all aware of them ahead of time. So we all do our own research. We talk to friends, family, our other constituents. We even get together one-on-one to talk about things just to kind of see where other people stand. A lot of times we even bring Winston in and talk to other POA staff people. So it's really a long process, or it can be, to go through and get prepared for the meeting, which then sometimes it does appear like it's a quick discussion, but there certainly has been a lot prior to that.
Right, and so I know a lot of times people are encouraged to write letters to board members. Do you all read those letters and take those into consideration when you're making decisions?
Most definitely. Seems like I'm getting a lot more now that I'm president, but I certainly try to respond to all of them as they come in.
So hopefully that helps us to understand how seriously the board takes all of their decisions and how much research is done, sometimes hours of data review and discussion before final votes are actually taken. As usual, you and your fellow board members have a lot of important issues to talk about this year. These issues are reflected in the goals that the board has adopted for 2022. Can you tell us about those goals?
Certainly. We've identified 4 primary goals for 2022. As you know, Winston Blazer, our current CEO, is retiring at the end of the year, so one of our top goals is replacing him.
That's a big one.
Another one is, since we acquired the Cooper properties and the Kahidi entrance property, is developing a land use plan for those properties. The third one is completing a reserve study, and the final one is reviewing all of our major contracts.
So let's break them down for our viewers, beginning with replacement of the CEO. With longtime CEO Winston Blazer retiring at the end of this year, I'm sure the effort to find his successor is in full force.
Yes, it is. We've actually started this last year and it's carried forward into this year. Where we're at right now is we developed an updated job description as well as a job specification. Primarily that contains information about Tellico Village, you know, how many residents, we have 3 golf courses, the buildings that we maintain, about our rec facilities, the marinas, etc. And so just gives anybody looking at the position an idea of what is involved. Then what we did is we put together core competencies that we believe are necessary for somebody to fill that role. And we had help with that from Susan Lehman, who is a resident here in the village with lots of executive recruiting experience. Then what we did is we posted it on the CAI website. CAI stands for Community Association Institute. And so that's been posted since the beginning of February. So what we've decided in our last board meeting is we're going to contract an outside search firm. The name of that firm is Qualigence, and they're going to be used to basically take all the information that we have so far and help us identify a candidate. Typically takes 60 to 90 days to fill, and then we'll just have to see, depending on the person selected, what kind of time frame then we can then get them in here.
So do you have a target that you're shooting for on time frame?
We're hoping that we have somebody identified in the July timeframe and hopefully on board then by the third quarter.
The selection will be no small task, and I am thankful that the decision is in good hands with you and the rest of the board. So I know that's going to be a big one for this year.
Yes.
Another big one is the land use map, and that's the second goal that you listed. So with the recent purchase, as you said, of the remaining land from the original developer, Cooper Communities, and the village now controls its own destiny. So now that the POA is the developer, this adds a whole new dimension to developing this map. What is the plan for laying out the best use for this land in both the near and long term?
So the way we've started this is basically turn it over to Winston and his team to basically identify what they would do based upon what they know of the village so far. So he is involving like the golf people, the rec people, the marketing people, the public works people. So everybody to get their ideas on what we should be doing with this property. Also involving the long range planning committee. So the plan right now is for them to have a recommendation to the board by the end of June.
Great. That's a lofty goal.
Right, and there's lots of things to consider. You know, from the survey, a lot of residents would like to see us have more green space, more park areas. Mm-hmm. So that certainly will be incorporated into that. Do we want to add more lots? Do we have the infrastructure to support more lots? So lots of things going into the initial recommendation.
So obviously that information too will be vital to ensuring the maintenance, repair, and replacement of elements of our infrastructure and amenities are properly funded for today and in the future. So just as you mentioned, do we have the infrastructure to handle more lots? Do we have the amenities to handle a larger population, and what does that look like for the future? Yeah.
Right. And that's really a great segue into the next goal, right?
Right.
Into the reserve funding valuation. Right. That's been bantered about on the board for over a year now. What is the right level of reserve funding that we need to have? Mm-hmm. We did an internal assessment last year and came up with a number. We said right around $9 million, but we really want to have people that do this for a living and are familiar with our types of communities give us a recommendation on what that reserve balance needs to be.
Right.
So basically what they do is they come in and they look at our assets, put a valuation on them, and then apply a certain percentage as to what you should have in your savings basically to save up for a rainy day.
So how far along are you in that process?
We've not begun that yet.
Okay.
We're in the process of trying to identify somebody to come in to actually do the assessment. But the goal is to have that done by the end of June so that we can incorporate it into the budget process. And the other part I want to mention about that goal is to also create an investment policy. Because if we have 9 million, 10 million, whatever millions of dollars in our reserve funds, we don't want to be getting savings account returns.
Right. So, and then the last goal you mentioned was reviewing POA contracts. So can you give us a few examples of what the board considers to be major contracts and the importance of their review?
We want to be sure we're on some type of a cycle that we're looking at our major contracts. And those are the ones that are typically over $1 million in any given year. So we're looking at people like Jacobs Engineering, AWE Hospitality, Sweetwater Valley Oil, Teleco Dirt Works, people like that. So we have a handful of contracts, and we'll be getting started on that very soon.
To segue into our next topic, it's safe to say that many of the decisions the board is making lately are impacted by growth in the village. So you and I have talked about a few indicators of this growth, one of which is home and lot sales, permits, and home starts. What are the latest stats in this area?
What I'd like to do is refer to a slide that I got from the marketing group, and it basically gives what lot purchases and construction have been like over like the last 5 years. And as you can see by looking at the slide here, the blue line, the one that goes to the very top, are the number of lots sold. And then the next line down, the red one, are the number of building permits issued. The third line down, which is the gray line, are those homes that are the number of homes under construction.
Wow.
And then the final line, the yellow line at the bottom, are completed homes, so homes that actually got completed in that year. And without getting into a lot of the numbers, you can see from the graph that we're going up very fast. 20 and 21 have been significant growth years for the village. But you also see that the projections start going down in 22 and beyond. The reason for that is, we're starting to look at inflationary pressures, consumer confidence is waning a little bit, inflation's coming in. So marketing and long-range planning have been looking at that in terms of, okay, how do we project where we're going to be in the future?
Right. So I know the board reviewed a report that was a joint effort between the marketing department and the long-range planning advisory committee. That included an estimated time frame for build-out. Can you give us a brief overview of that report?
Sure. If we look at my next slide, it's called Tellico Village Residential Growth Rate. And basically, it's the number of homes in the village. It's a bar chart, and you can see by year what our total number of homes has been. So we've gone from 4,185 homes in 2017 to currently we are at or just above 5,000.
Wow.
So we're projecting to end 2022 at around 5,100 homes. And then you can see it goes up a little bit there on out. If you look at long-range planning and marketing and their projections, they're saying that we could be built out anywhere between 2026 and 2030. And just for perspective, if we say there's just over 5,000 homes in the village, we have 6,800 lots in the village. So if we built out 100%, 6,800, there are a lot of those lots that are for sale that prior years we thought might be unbuildable. So at one point, build out was expected to be around 85%. So if that was the case, we'd be even closer to build out. But what we're finding is that with the demand being so high in Tellico Village, people are building on those lots.
Right. So considering the eye-opening report on projected build-out for the village, that just reiterates why we must be prepared for the impact of growth on our infrastructure. While I realize that much of the planning for this is operational, so handled by the POA staff, in what ways is the board preparing for the impact on village infrastructure?
That's a good question. And we get that question a lot, especially with some of the issues that we've seen in recent times. Water pressure being one, some sewer system issues. So certainly those are areas that we've got to keep a close eye on. So we as a board are working with POA staff and the Public Services Advisory Committee to make sure we have a plan in place that's going to address growth in the village and those main infrastructure issues. Those aren't the only ones, but I'll start with them. So recently we just completed, we didn't complete, but we had an outside firm, Jacobs Engineering, completed a study of our water system. And in it, they gave recommendations of what we need to do to basically upgrade it. It's 35 years old. And the other thing to remember is when this infrastructure was put in place, the original plan was that the homes were going to be a lot smaller. The lots were not going to have lawn irrigation. So there are a lot of things that are different now compared to the original plan. This plan basically puts together a series of investments that we're going to need to make to upgrade the water system so it's compatible with where we're at today and future build out. The plan has been presented to the board, and it will be discussed in our next board meeting, the open session, coming in April.
And so that also is kind of where the reserve fund study comes into play, right?
Yes, that's right. It certainly ties together because we want to have the funds there to help defray any of the costs that'll be involved. Now, I mentioned the sewer system. There's also a sewer system study being put together by Jacobs Engineering. But what we've done is we've put that study on hold because we're seeing a lot of water infiltration on heavy rain events into our sewer system. So it really wouldn't be accurate to have a sewer system study right now until the POA, in which they are doing, they're working to rectify that situation. So if we can get that water stopped from infiltrating our system, we can do a better study in terms of what is going to be needed in future years. Another big infrastructure item are our roads. So we have 110 miles of roads in the village, and we are seeing a lot more wear and tear on them, especially with all the construction traffic that we have. So we've got to be sure that we are doing correct inspections on the roads and staying on top of all the maintenance that we need. We're currently putting in investing over $1 million in maintenance on our roads every year.
Wow.
And then I'll say that the final, maybe not the final, but another infrastructure piece that we need to be looking at are all of our buildings.
Right.
You know, we just upgraded built a new Tokwa clubhouse, upgraded the Kahiti facility. We have the yacht club, the wellness center, the Chota Rec Center, and other buildings that we've got to stay on top of as well.
As those age, they require a little bit more attention.
And as you mentioned earlier, the key to all this is so it doesn't impact us too heavily when we have to invest, is to be sure that we have our reserve funds adequately
Funded.
funded.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just need them. Yeah, I agree. So often when we talk about the impact of growth on infrastructure, we typically then turn our attention to amenities. You've talked a little bit about the amenities in some of the facilities that you mentioned, but they too will be impacted by significant village growth. So how is the board preparing for amenity needs now and in the future?
So as you know, Carla, this is my third year on the board, and the focus for my whole tenure so far has been on building up reserves and not spending any money on additional amenities. Since we invested in the Tokwa Clubhouse and the Kahiti Community Center. But your point is very well taken. We've got to be looking at making sure we're staying current and that we are offering the amenities that current residents and potential new residents want to see. One advantage that we have is the formation of Timeless Teleco. And what that's done is that's basically created a forum where if we have wants that want to be, that we want to start investing in, but it's not necessarily considered a need, people can donate money and then we can potentially start an amenity. So one example is the Pickleplex, wherein we've got residents that are donating money so we can get started on that amenity.
Great.
In fact, the board just approved going ahead with construction of 4 new pickleball courts.
That's great. So you mentioned Timeless Teleco. So Timeless Teleco is a foundation, a nonprofit 501c3 corporation that was founded for the purpose of expanding or building recreation amenities in the village and in the area. In some cases, like the kayak launch that they just completed.
Right.
The idea is that they can, in some cases, speed up when we can add an amenity because perhaps it's in the 10-year plan, but the POA is not ready to spend the money on that for a few years. But because of the demand and the people who are involved in that particular activity want to move it up, that's a way that we can do that, right? We can collect money, we can do that through Timeless Teleco, and then be able to build that amenity without really dipping into our amenity reserve funds.
That's correct.
Now, do you feel like the role of Timeless Teleco is to replace the investment of the POA into future amenities, or how do you feel like that partnership?
No, and I think that's what we've got to be careful of, is not expecting Timeless Teleco to fund any new amenity that's wanted in the village. And that really ties well into the long-range strategic plan and being sure that we have those items in our 10-year budget. And so one of the things that we're going to be looking at this year is being sure that we have those main things that are identified in the long-term strategic plan actually in the 10-year budget.
Right.
So it'll be a lot easier than to look at, like you mentioned earlier, moving forward the Pickleplex. You know, it was at one point scheduled to begin in 2025. So if it's a matter of saying, okay, instead of making that investment in 2025, we're going to start now in 2022. And oh, by the way, we've got some funding from Timeless Teleco that's going to help defray the costs.
So it's not designed to be the only way to add amenities to the village, but rather to provide a resource to build desired amenities sooner, perhaps, or to expand planned investments by the POA.
That's correct.
Is that a good description of that?
Right.
Okay. Every now and then, the board discusses a topic about which property owners have strong opinions. Often, these board meetings result in packed houses. One hot topic that has been discussed more than once is the POA board policy regarding flags. This was on the agenda again a couple of months ago. What was the result?
So yes, in January, at the end of the meeting, this topic was brought up again in the other section by a resident, basically asking the POA and the board to restrict political flags. So we said we'd take it under advisement, which we did, and we put it on the agenda then for the February meeting. And since it was on the agenda, everybody knew we were going to talk about it, so yes, we had a packed house. In fact, what we did is we modified the agenda so we would do that topic first. So yeah, it was probably a good idea in that after that topic was discussed, lots of people left. This might be a good point to encourage people to watch and listen to the other business that goes on in these board meetings, because it really does pertain to the lifestyle that we have here, the money that we invest, and things like that, and not just topics that basically raise the ire of people at certain times. So we had some discussion on this political flag topic, and the board has not changed its stance, and this has come up several times, like you said, over the past several years. And the board has been consistent in its reply in that we are not going to regulate flags. If anybody wants to see more about that discussion, that's available through Tellico Village Network, and they can watch the full live stream of that board meeting.
Excellent.
And the other thing I would say is that all the policies, the covenants and restrictions, and any other pertinent information are available on the Tellico Village POA website.
So that's actually really good advice. Tellico Village Network and the POA Communications Department provide these valuable resources, allowing us to watch the board meetings online and to review the policies on the website. And this provides accurate information, official information for our property owners so that they don't have to rely on social media or hearsay about these hot topics.
Yes, and I guess I just want to reiterate that I encourage villagers to look at the official information, which is on the Tellico Village website and POA publications like the Telegram, and not on other outside sources that may or may not have correct or full information.
And there's an easy way to ask quick questions and get information quickly, and that is to email Truth Be Told, and that information is on the website as well. And we'll be putting links to the board meetings and the board policies in the caption and in the description of this video when people watch it on demand, so they'll be able to follow those links really easily. So I think that's excellent advice.
And that's a very good point. We have been receiving several cards and letters through Truth Be Told, so I want to encourage anybody that has any questions of the board. Certainly we welcome input, questions, whatever, and that's probably a good source or a good way to do it is through Truth Be Told.
So what's cooking for Q2? Do you have any insight to share on what's coming up over the next few months?
Well, I think primarily it's a reiteration of what we talked about earlier. Certainly the big things that we have going on is the CEO search. I mean, that's a huge one. We've got the water and sewer study plans that we've got to be on top of. We've got to complete the reserve study. We've got the land use plan. And we also need to start the major contract reviews. So we've got quite a few things in the hopper. And then added to that is, like I said earlier, we just approved going forward with building 4 new pickleball courts.
Right.
So that'll be exciting to see as well.
So you kind of laid out the agenda for the year when you established those major goals for the board, right?
Yes, and they're all hitting at once, right at the start of the year, which is good. A good way to accomplish your goals is to get started early on them.
All right, do you want to talk at all about the trash contract?
Well, what's happened is most people are aware that Republic Services took over, or basically bought out Santec. And they've had some issues, yes, in their performance here of collecting trash and recyclables. And we have put them on notice. So we wrote them an official letter putting them on notice, and that we expect them to get the situation rectified, or we're going to be looking at another provider.
So we'll expect more information about that to come up in our next quarterly update as well.
Yes, according to the contract, we have to identify them of any deficiencies that they have, and they have 30 days to rectify.
Okay.
So that's in the contract.
As usual, it sounds like the board's going to be really busy. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come and provide this update. And big thanks to you and your fellow board members for your diligent work in making and keeping Tellico Village the best it can be. Thank you for tuning in to Tellico Village Network for your POA Board Update. Be sure to join us next time and invite your friends and neighbors to watch as well. We'll see you then.